Jonathan Kuminga had a meeting with the Sacramento Kings that I'm told went really well. Plus, RJ Barrett, a name to monitor because of his history with Kings general manager Scott Perry. And for the love of God, can we stop talking about Keon Ellis as part of a Jonathan Kuminga trade? It ain't happening. And you're listening to Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And I'd tell you I've got the latest on the Jonathan Kuminga situation, but in reality, it's a lot of the same. The most new information that we have is that the Sacramento Kings and Jonathan Kuminga met recently. And I have been told that the meeting went really well. Now, that doesn't mean anything beyond there's, of course, mutual interest on both sides. Jonathan Kuminga would be open to signing with the Sacramento Kings and playing for the Sacramento Kings. I'm sure he looks at the Kings as more of an opportunity to get a predominant role compared to what he's getting with the Golden State Warriors. And of course, the Sacramento Kings have interest in Kaminga. The opportunity that acquiring Kaminga presents and acquiring a piece that fits more of a long-term timeline instead of the short-term veteran roster that they have right now. All of this is great. A lot of it we've already known. And I'm happy to hear that at least the conversations between those two parties are going well. But the conversations between the Sacramento Kings and Golden State Warriors in a sign and trade situation have not changed. If they have, it's only slightly. We are in a stalemate. That's what it is. Just a stalemate between these two teams. Earlier in the week, Shams from ESPN shared that there are two concrete offers actually on the table for Kaminga. Sure, there have been discussions that have been had with other teams around the league and whatever, but there are only two actual concrete offers on the table for Kaminga. One of them is an offer from the Phoenix Suns. I don't know the specifics of that deal, but it's not great. The Warriors are not interested in it. And the other offer is from the Sacramento Kings. And it's basically the exact same offer that I shared with you a month ago. Devin Carter, Dario Saric, and where things have slightly changed in any sort of way is initially it was second round draft pick compensation. Now we're talking about a potentially protected first rounder. And I'm not talking top 10 protected. I'm talking a first rounder with some pretty heavy protections that in my mind, more likely than not, would end up just conveying into a future second or future seconds down the road. And of course, the Golden State Warriors are not interested in that package. Let me reiterate this, because I've said this a number of times here on Locked On Kings since the moment I heard that Saric-Carter offer in the first place. I don't blame the Warriors for not being excited by that deal. I don't blame them. I don't blame their fan base at all. What I do blame the Warriors for is this preposterous idea that they feel that they could get Keon Ellis or Keegan Murray in a deal. Of course they want either of those guys. I want a Lamborghini. Doesn't mean realistically I'm ever going to get one. Why would the Sacramento Kings, or any team for that matter, give up more value for a player than what the Warriors themselves actually value that player. Keon Ellis is more valuable and important to the Sacramento Kings than Jonathan Kuminga is to the Golden State Warriors. Keegan Murray is way more valuable to the Sacramento Kings than what Jonathan Kuminga is to the Golden State Warriors. Now, that doesn't mean that both of those players are better than Kuminga. That doesn't mean that both of those players have higher ceilings than Kaminga. Jonathan Kuminga's got all the upside in the world. But everybody in the league, everybody that calls themselves even a casual basketball fan, knows how the Golden State Warriors feel about Jonathan Kuminga. They have not hidden it. They've made it very obvious based off of how they have handled his situation and his playing time. Everybody knows that Steve Kerr is not a believer in Jonathan Kuminga. Everybody knows that Jonathan Kuminga doesn't want to be there. Everybody knows that the Warriors don't want to pay Jonathan Kuminga. So why in the world would any team give up a piece that they value for more, or that's more than what the Warriors value Kaminga? It doesn't make any sense. Again, that doesn't mean that the Warriors just have to suck it up and just take the Kings' offer and just accept your losses. No, they don't have to do that. They can do the qualifying offer if Kaminga agrees to it. They can sign him and figure it out down the road. And more than likely, that's what I think is going to end up happening. But that does not bother the Sacramento Kings. It doesn't. Think about it. Flip the script, okay? Flip perspectives. Let's say the Sacramento Kings and Keegan Murray are not on the same page. It has not worked. Keegan Murray's contract is coming up, or Keegan Murray is an unrestricted, or excuse me, a restricted free agent. But the Sacramento Kings don't believe in Keegan. They're barely paying him or playing him anymore. The coaching staff does not really believe that he's a fit for the Kings and their window and what they're trying to do right now. And they don't want to pay him the money that he thinks he's worth, or a rough estimate of the range that we think he's going to cost because of the Kings cap situation or whatever. The Kings are basically out on Keegan Murray. But they're calling the Golden State Warriors up and going, okay, give us Jonathan Kuminga in that deal. And we're assuming that the Warriors, in this scenario, again, flip script, Jonathan Kuminga is a piece in Golden State. Or give us Podemski, right? Warriors fans, think about that. How would you react to that? You would laugh. You would laugh. And it's fitting that you would laugh, because this Keon Ellis conversation keeps coming up. It keeps happening. It's happening in Sacramento a ton today on Sacramento radio. ESPN 1320, Kenny Caraway on D-Lo and Casey talking with Jesse Tapia and Leezy. Love those guys. And they're 100% in their right to talk about this. And I know what they're doing because I understand it. I'm also trying to get through this offseason too. I'm trying to get through the next 2 months where there's nothing going on in the NBA until training camp starts. Preseason is over 2 months away, right? We are in a dead period for the NBA. And this is one of the few things that we can latch on and talk about. But that's all this is. This is talk. It's not real. Because I have reached out multiple times at different times about the possibility of Keon being included in a Jonathan Kuminga trade. I have been laughed at every single time. I've gotten the same response. LOL, not happening. That's what I'm getting. Right? And it makes sense why. I understand the conversation that Kenny's having and other people are having. Matt, if you have a chance to get Jonathan Kuminga, don't you have to consider moving on from a role player in Keon Ellis to go out and take that chance on Kuminga? I understand that conversation completely from Kings fans or from anybody that's looking at Kuminga as an asset and an opportunity that the Kings might not have again. And maybe because those opportunities are few and far between in Sacramento, giving up Keon is worth it. But that's what this is. Acquiring Jonathan Kuminga is an opportunity. It's a project. It's not a necessity in the eyes of the Sacramento Kings. The Kings can move on without acquiring Jonathan Kuminga with confidence that something else will open itself up down the road. Or maybe the door to a Kaminga signing or Kaminga trade can reopen at the trade deadline or next offseason if he's an unrestricted free agent after signing the qualifying offer, whatever. They can kick the can down the road a little bit. They don't have to do it right now. Yes, the Kings would like to have Jonathan Kuminga. I think Kaminga is a good project at a right time for this organization. But understand this, and this is what I keep coming back to in this conversation. Why would the Sacramento Kings bow to the Warriors or give the Warriors a get-out-of-jail-free card for a situation that they created? The Warriors hold the cards in terms of they get to decide what happens with Kaminga, for sure. Sign and trade, they get the final say on that. Issuing him an offer or signing as a restricted free agent, they have the final say on that. 100%. They hold the cards in that sense. But they are in the worst spot out of any team in these conversations, in these negotiations. The Kings would like to have Jonathan Kuminga, but they're not forced to deal with him right now. The Golden State Warriors are. If you were to give up a player of the caliber of Keon Ellis, a player that you know your organization values and 29 other organizations around the league values, if you give that up and give the Warriors that out when they're the ones in the messy situation, it's foolish. It's dumb. Scott Perry does not have to do it, so he's not going to. He's not. I feel so confident it is not going to happen, and everything I've been told has been it's not going to happen. And if Warrior fans' responses, and I get these responses, I get them on social media all the time. Okay, then the Kings aren't getting Kaminga. Cool. Okay. Then the Kings aren't getting Kaminga right now. Oh, darn. Jonathan Kuminga is not the difference between the Sacramento Kings winning a championship or being the mid-team that they're going to be next season. And clearly, the Golden State Warriors don't feel that Jonathan Kuminga is the right player to help maximize their title window for Steph Curry before he rides off to the sunset, and his career comes to an end. So cool. If that package for Kaminga is not enough to get a deal done and the Warriors say no to it, fine. All right, the Kings will move on and the Warriors will have the same problem. That's the position that we are in and we've been in for the last month. Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Summer sports are in full swing, and whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the green, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action this summer. Heck, we're using it to kill some time right now, right? But why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned at the beach. Use FanDuel to track your favorite teams, your favorite matchups, and the app will keep things fresh, new, and fun all summer long with different ways and new ways to bet. It's easy to use. Payouts are extremely fast when you win and makes every regular season game feel like a must-watch event. Whether you're placing a same-game parlay or watching a bet right into the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you are part of the action. If you're new to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com to get started. Let's talk a little bit about RJ Barrett. Now, I want to make this perfectly clear so nobody takes this out of context or takes this and runs with it. I am not saying that the Sacramento Kings are close to acquiring RJ Barrett, that they're in aggressive talks with the Toronto Raptors about an RJ Barrett trade. What I'm telling you is that RJ Barrett is a name that the Sacramento Kings are monitoring and a name that we should monitor as well. And there's a very specific reason why the Kings are keeping an eye on RJ and his potential availability in Toronto. It's because Scott Perry drafted RJ Barrett with the 3rd overall pick in 2019 when he was the general manager of the New York Knicks. RJ Barrett was his guy. And from what I've been told, he and RJ Barrett have a great relationship. And Perry is a big believer in RJ as a player. Now, has RJ Barrett lived up to the hype coming into the league as the 3rd overall pick? No, probably not. And I don't think RJ Barrett has turned into the player that Perry initially hoped he would be when he drafted him with the 3rd overall pick in 2019. But there still is a belief in RJ, and it makes perfect sense for the Sacramento Kings and Scott Perry to be keeping an eye on RJ's availability and if he could potentially come to Sacramento. And I believe the Kings would like to use this. It doesn't work financially straight up because RJ is making $27 million next season, and I think $29 million the season after. But the Kings would love to, or would be open to potentially using like Malik Monk in a deal to go out and acquire RJ. I would not call this likely at all this offseason. Right? This is something the Kings are monitoring, something to monitor, to track, to follow, to know that there's interest from the Kings and a connection with Scott Perry, but nothing more than that at this time. Would the Kings like to acquire RJ right now if they could? Sure. There's no realistic path to doing that, I don't feel. I don't think a RJ Barrett for DeMar DeRozan trade is on the table. Again, all indications to me are that the Kings and DeMar DeRozan are going to continue their partnership going forward, and that Scott Perry is a fan of DeMar DeRozan and wants DeMar DeRozan here. Zach LaVine's contract, don't think it's being moved. Domantas Sabonis' contract, don't think it can be moved. And the other smaller money contracts, the Kings have tried to move or are struggling to move and have struggled to move over the course of this offseason, and they're not enough to go out and acquire a player like RJ Barrett. So I'm not expecting anything on the RJ Barrett sweepstakes to happen, and maybe another team comes and swoops in and takes RJ. This is something to like keep an eye on and revisit during the season and maybe monitor when the trade deadline gets closer. Right? Is RJ, does his price go down because things aren't working in Toronto? Or at that time, are the Kings more willing to move on from DeMar DeRozan or whatever the case may be? But RJ Barrett is a name to keep an eye on, and that the Sacramento Kings, I've been told, are keeping an eye on and monitoring. And I'm curious what you think about RJ. We've had conversations about RJ earlier this offseason about a potential target. Again, I don't think it's anything that's happening necessarily this summer, but I think anytime there's going to be rumors and news of conversations around RJ Barrett's availability going forward, the Sacramento Kings to some extent will be involved. Not necessarily as front runners or anything like that, or a team that's hungry and desperate to go and get him, but the Kings will be involved in those conversations. And I think that's going to be interesting to monitor. Another thing I want to talk about Devin Carter really quick. From what I understand, the Kings are still, clearly as part of the Jonathan Kuminga trade too, the Kings are still very much making Devin Carter available. I'm not saying the Kings are desperate to move him or anything like that, but Devin Carter's performance in Summer League doesn't seem to have changed any of that or impacted any of that at all. While he's a member of the Sacramento Kings, he's maybe going to get opportunity. The Kings do see some of the value of what he brings to the table. Scott Perry knows that he is able to handle certain responsibilities on the defensive end. I don't believe Scott Perry and many in Sacramento feel that Devin Carter is a good option at that backup point guard spot. I don't know if they feel that anybody on this roster right now is a good option at the backup point guard spot, and maybe Neek Clifford could become that, but I don't know if they feel like he'd be able to do that from day one. I still think Devin Carter will be on this Kings roster come the start of training camp and the start of next season, but I have pretty strong feelings and gotten pretty strong indications that the Kings are still very much making Devin Carter available and looking to move him in the right deal this offseason or early next season or whenever that time may be. Before we wrap up, I wanted to talk about something that Scott Perry talked about on Sacktown Sports 1140 Radio. He was on earlier this week with Carmichael Dave on the Carmichael Dave Show, which you can catch in the mornings on Sacktown Sports with Jason Ross. Jason Ross co-hosts that show. Perry was talking about Keegan Murray, and he told Dave, quote, "In an ideal world, I'd like to be able to get Keegan more opportunities playing the small forward." Makes perfect sense to me. I think a lot of people in Sacramento, including many of you in my comment section, have been calling for that same thing. We think Keegan's more of a 3, not a 4. We want to see how Keegan can get to that 3 spot. I don't see any realistic scenario of that happening anytime soon. Like, certainly with the way the roster is constructed now, I don't know how you could possibly get Keegan to the 3 unless Maxime Reynaud is like ahead of schedule and you could play Maxime at the 4 and Sabonis at the 5 or vice versa. Like, that's the only realistic pathway that I see to Keegan Murray getting time at that 3 spot. And even then, if you're playing Keegan at the 3, one of Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan can't be in the game unless one of the two of them is running the point, which sounds like a disaster. I know in an ideal world, the Kings would like to get Keegan some opportunity at that 3 spot. It's going to be few and far between, and anytime it happens, it's really not going to make sense. And even if the Kings were to go out and acquire Jonathan Kuminga, is Kaminga moving potentially to the 4 so Keegan can play 3? No, I would say Kaminga's probably the 3, and Keegan's the 4 next to him. So I understand the appeal or the desire to have enough size and length in Sacramento to be able to play Keegan Murray realistically and regularly at the 3. It just ain't here. We are a long way off from anything like that happening. It's good that that's a goal of Perry's, but I imagine that's a goal to accomplish after Keegan Murray is re-signed, not before. Keith Smith wrote an article recently talking about, and he talked to a Kings executive about both Keon Ellis' contract situation and Keegan Murray's contract situation, and both were pretty optimistic, talking about like the Kings want to get deals done with both of them, feel pretty good about getting deals done with both of them. I feel like deals are going to get done on both those ends. Like, going back to the Kaminga and Keon Ellis conversation from the first segment, like, that's the only realistic way that makes sense to me at all that the Kings would ever consider using Keon Ellis in a Jonathan Kuminga deal, is if, because they picked up his option for $2.5 million or whatever it is, that Keon is so upset and his camp is so upset by the money that was left on the table for not getting him a new deal this summer, that the bridge is burned and he's refusing to re-sign with the Kings going forward, and he's going to leave in unrestricted free agency next summer. If the Kings felt that way, then maybe they'd be willing to include Keon in a Jonathan Kuminga trade. Again, I've been given no indication that that's the case. I've been told, in fact, that everybody's in good spirits, or they're on the same page. Well, maybe not the same page. That's me adding my own commentary. I've been told that there's no like animosity. Everybody's on good terms. That's what I've been told. Like, as of right now, it's fine. There's no doubt in my mind that Keon and his camp are at the very least disappointed, more than likely frustrated that they didn't get a deal done this summer, and they probably didn't feel like they were the priority this summer. And you know, when I spoke on it when it happened, I would have just gotten the Keon Ellis deal done and then figured everything else out after that. That's not what happened. But I don't think we're anywhere near that hypothetical scenario that I just laid out there, that Keon is so upset that the Kings are basically worried they're going to lose him for nothing, so they include him in a Kaminga trade. That's not where we're at. So, and I don't think we're anywhere close to Keegan Murray playing the 3 in Sacramento consistently anytime soon. All right, I want to hear your thoughts on the latest on the Jonathan Kuminga situation, your thoughts on RJ Barrett as a potential long-term target to keep an eye out on. Whatever you want to talk about, hit me up. Even Warrior fans listening, feel free to share your 2 cents and your side, your perspective on things. At Matt George Sack on Twitter. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Appreciate your support as always. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode of Locked On Kings. Until then, my name is Matt George. You've been listening to the Locked On Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.